The opinions, viewpoints, and advice shared in this podcast are solely those of the host, Dave McGlynn, and should not be interpreted as reflecting or endorsed by the Department of the Army or the Department of Defense Fire and Emergency Services.
All right. Welcome to another Fire Engineering Podcast. The Training Officer, I'm your host, Dave McGlynn. If you're not familiar with the show, one, I thank you for tuning in. Two, a little background. We try to talk to leaders, instructors, just some great-minded people all throughout the fire service, the military, the police, just people that are in education and looking to try to develop people and make our thing as well as anything else a little bit better. What I like to do is I typically like to try to talk to people, see what they've done in their career to bring them to where they're at, talk to them about the things that they are passionate about, the things that they want to bring to the fire service or anything else, and then get their background. The nice thing is with this platform that fire engineering has given us is that we're able to take people and share information from other people so that you, the listener, viewer, are able to hear that information and maybe it resonates with you. Maybe you're able to empathize with it and say, well, hey, I'm not alone in my problems. So again, thank you for joining in tonight. We have another great guest, another great friend. Recently found out that probably the reason why we hit it off was because he was originally a Jersey boy. So that's a great thing. So I'm joined by Sean Duffy. Sean Duffy's got over 18 years in the fire service. He's an instructor at FDIC. He holds the rank of captain. He grew up in Jersey, then Florida, now lives in Michigan. And he's got great programs. He's got his own podcast with Nick Pepper, and he goes all around and does his stuff. And if you don't know him, you're a fool. He's definitely probably one of the most humble people that has the following that he has in our thing. And I really appreciate his friendship and his brotherhood. So, Sean, thank you for joining me tonight, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I just do have to clarify real quick. Man, I'm a fireman. I did travel down that officer path for a little bit, but currently right now I am a firefighter. So
I'm sorry. I knew you were a captain at one point.
Yeah. It's all good. Hey, you know what? It's no problem at all. We can get into that another day. I don't want to give anybody the wrong impression. Certainly not trying to claim the title of something I have not earned yet. So that's where we're at. But thank you for having me on. I really do appreciate being here.
No, absolutely, brother. I appreciate that we're able to make it happen. So you have a few things that obviously you instruct. You do a lot of hot stuff as well. But one of the programs that you have that I've been able to be fortunate to sit in a few times, and I think obviously hits the biggest stride and has the largest impact because it's such a great program is Searchable versus Survivable. And you've taught it all over for a number of years now. So my first question would be, what inspired you to put that type of program together? And what was your intent in bringing it out to the public?
Yeah. So basically, what do we do in the fire service, right? We get pretty frustrated about things. So we generally take action. That could be positive or negative, but in this case, I feel it's pretty positive. Really, you know what you know, right? And when I got into the fire service at 18 years old, I was just trained how to do searching pretty much the same way everybody else is, right? Like hold on to this boot, go left, go right, don't leave the wall, all that stuff. And as I progressed through my career and the more experience I got, I realized this isn't probably the most efficient way. And then, further on, we're going to fires and I'm watching people get pulled out and we're doing these things. And I'm just thinking to myself, man, what would have happened if we could have gotten there? Maybe we got on that search a little bit sooner. What would have happened if our search training was better, right? We had a better understanding of what it was, because even till today, man, there's still some places where it's a pretty basic concept, right? Hey, just go in there and, you find somebody, and stumbling upon somebody and physically searching for them are two different things. And that was really my hiccup there, is man, there's just so much to this I felt I didn't know. So I started researching. I started talking to people that that probably, were a lot better at this than me, reaching out to the go-to people, going to trainings and stuff. And then I found Firefighter Rescue Survey, and I just continued to try and pull this information in. So fast forward to about 2019, I finally felt like I was at a point where I could say, like, hey, I gotta bring this to people, and we got to have this conversation. I just feel like it's one that needs to be had. And so I put it together like a small little PowerPoint, did it at my fire department. Didn't really think much of it. It was just me and my buddy Pablo kind of like throwing things back and forth. And we had worked for the same fire department. So our ultimate objective was, hey, maybe we can implement some of this here. Maybe, we could do that. And we just hung out at the training center. We fine-tuned a lot of things, and we just put it out there. And I wasn't really sure how it was going to go. It's been received very well. It's been updated and is something that's constantly being worked on. When you look back to where it was to where it is now, it's insane just to think like the amount of knowledge that we're still getting as a fire service in this particular topic. And a lot of people are jumping on that now. And I think we're in a good spot where we're finally starting to see that culture shift in the realm of search.
No, I absolutely agree with that. I like the background on it. It's funny you talked about the hand on the boot thing. Like a lot of us that are in our age group, we're at that cusper, Gen Xer becoming the millennial generation, but we were still brought up that long ago. That's the thing is like, I've been a fireman 24 years. I don't feel like it's that long because I know dudes that have been doing it way longer than me and still doing it. But the point is like, I feel like I'm pretty young, and that was the methodology that we were taught to do search. And I'm not trying to knock people. It's just that was, and then the other thing I like that you said, because it's a pet peeve of mine, is like that just because you've stumbled upon someone doesn't mean the search is over. And like one of the things I noticed just training folks is like, there's been times where we would do a drill and we would do a search drill, and they'd go in, and do a right-handed search and be 5 feet in the door and find a victim. And they're like, all right, search complete. Like, the house is 2,000 square feet. How's the search complete? And then they think that the next crew going in, that's the secondary search. It's not, it's still on the primary search because you didn't complete the search. And these are things that people need to understand. And it's like, I feel like we're doing a better job, like you said before, where you ended it, with the cultural piece. We're doing a better job with people like yourself that we're not knocking our predecessors or the people who came before us with the methodologies, because at the time they worked. But as everything, we evolve, and we have found better approaches and maybe expose certain gaps on how we can handle or mitigate those gaps. So, I think that the program itself is absolutely necessary. Things like that need to happen all over for all facets of the fire service, because there's no reason to not want to evolve and improve. There's always that adage of like, why reinvent the wheel? Well, because, we learn more and we grow more. So why would we not train on more,
No, I couldn't agree more. And that was, that's really where it was for me, is like, when you answer a question, and like, this is my biggest pet peeve, like you generally want to understand something, right? And you just get like a stupid answer, like, well, because I said so, or that's just the way it's always been. And, it's like,
that's the way we've always done it. Yeah.
Yeah. I just got tired of hearing that. And, I'm like, man, I'm going to fires and we're doing these searches, and then just like, we're high-fiving at the end of these fires. Like, we did a great job. And then here I am telling you, like, I don't know if we really hit the mark the way we thought we did. And when you brought that to the table and you're like, hey, but I know we completed it, right? Like, I was there, I was part of it. Like, I get that, but like, it took us 12 minutes to do this search, right? Is that really like a good benchmark? And it wasn't meant to be like negative. I was generally curious, like, what does this look like, right? Like, Should we be faster? Should, like our communications be different? Like, and nobody can give me those answers. And that was the most frustrating thing. It's just like, man, like there's got to be a different way. And the cool thing is you only have knowledge if you seek it, right? But if you start going out there and you start asking people who work in departments that go to way more fires than you do, and you start taking these classes and you're like, why is this technique the way it is? Like, what makes it so successful? And then you take that back and you apply it to your next fire, you will be amazed at the difference. Like, it just opens your mind. And that was really my goal for this whole thing, was just like, hey man, I just want to open people's minds to what's out there, and that there is a way to do this, that we can impact our civilians at a much higher level.
Right. Amen. So kudos to you for that. And that's like one of the things is like, we run into this fear factor, or we have the sheep mentality, which is okay. And I don't want everybody when I'm doing a class or a drill, I don't want everybody to think that they're in charge of the drill and start hijacking the material. But what happens is we don't get people to ask, well, hey, what next? What more? Did we think of this? And what happens is we did a drill with 20 people, and only one of those people thought the way you thought. So 19 of them go back to their stations, and that's the mentality. And then the next 19, same thing. And so it's a majority thing where you have to try to not correct, but like just expose alternatives and get people thinking, I've sat through your class, so I've had the fortune of it. So like one of the things that I like is like the perspective that you put on whether or not it's searchable. So like, I know you have like the picture, you'll have a picture of a building and it'll be involved, and, you'll have people, I like the interaction piece, and you'll have people talking about what they think and what they see. And then you're like, hey, your 4-year-old daughter's in there, and then it's like, oh, well, but then you also couple it with, that hard decision on either you as the company officer, you as the firefighter, or even the incident commander, of like whether or not it's still something that you should send people in to do. And I like that way that you frame that. It's very mature, which is really cool because, you're a younger instructor, and it's proven through your experience. It's something that I just enjoy about your program and the course itself. I think that it's really eye opening. Even for me, like I walked away from that, like I'm going to, bring some of these suggestions that you were delivering back to my department when I'm training guys in drills, just so that they have that understanding. So talking about the course, diving right into, the format. So in this course, you emphasize the importance of sizing up your search during the 360, right? And I really think that that's kind of cool too, because they don't really teach that. They don't make, when you conduct a 360, it's like you're looking for certain signs or whatever of this and that, but they don't really say like, hey, when you're doing a 360, like, size up your search. And I like that you're passing that on to people. So for those that haven't had the fortune of being able to take your class, and by the way, if you haven't registered for FDIC, register, and early bird ends soon, and go to Sean's class. And then, if you can, go to mine. I would appreciate it. But what should firefighters look for during the 360 to make quick, informed decisions about their search priorities?
Man, I love this question because there isn't like one specific answer, right? This when we talk about this is more of like a, hey, dummy, slow it down, right? Because our eyes as human beings naturally track towards movement and light. And like you kind of said already, like the way we're trained in our size up is basically like address the fire and then start doing stuff, right? And what I try and get people to understand is like there's so much more to this, right? And there's little visual cues that can pick us off or point us in the right direction, of maybe where we should. Like if we know where our fire's location is, right? Like, okay, is this on the first floor or the second floor? And, where are my bedrooms up here? and you might have those cues. But most importantly, when we're talking about exterior cues, like I like to look at it like, I know I don't have to tell this to anybody, but people don't put AC units in windows that they're not going to be occupying that room, right? So when we're looking at that, slow it down and be like, man, we got some window units in here. Which one of these spaces, if I need to choose where I'm going to start, which one of these am I going to hit? Am I going to hit the first floor or the second floor? And I think that matters. And then obviously going through and being like, okay, where's my smoke, right? What does my smoke tell me? What does my fire tell me? Like all those things, putting it together and basically looking at it and saying, hey, if I know that bedrooms are my highest priority, right? 45% of the time we're finding victims in bedrooms. And I know that 24 hours out of 24 hours a day, people are found at home. Then I now put those two pieces together. When I look at that, I go, well, what is this window telling me? Can I have an indication that maybe there is an isolated space in here? The window is kind of clear. There's not much smoke pushing out from it. There actually, could be a closed door. What does that mean for you? Or you're looking at something like maybe there's a circular driveway, right? Or a handicap ramp. Like those things are cues for me that, hey, there's something here that I probably need to slow down and think about, like, is this my best entry point? If I don't identify these entrance problems now, like, what does that mean for me on my search later if I find a victim, right? Like, where am I entering versus where am I be exiting? Like, there's a lot to it, right? So I just encourage people to kind of like take a moment and really take in the big picture. We used to have top finders, on windows, which were a great thing. Those kind of went away. And it is my belief that when those went away, so did a little bit of our aggressiveness to search through windows.
I agree.
And, just because those don't exist, well, I shouldn't say they don't exist. They just look different now. But just because those aren't as prevalent as they maybe once were, doesn't mean there's not other cues that's going to say, hey, this is a kid's bedroom, right? Or something like that. Like if you come to my house, my kids, they have stickers all over their windows, like of stuff. You could see that stuff from the outside, right? So like as I'm doing my 360, I can quickly identify like, hey, that's probably a kid's room right there, just those small things, man, that we tend to overlook because the fire scene is happening so fast that maybe we catch them later. And I want people to catch that stuff early, So one of the biggest things that I tell everybody is like handicap ramps are a good one. As a searcher, if I see a handicap ramp, that automatically tells me something I want to know on my search. And, it's not an always or never, but I look at it and I go, hey, knowing what I know about being in these types of homes, people generally take the doors off, right? So that they can navigate those spaces easier in a wheelchair and things like that. So when I see something like that, my mind goes to, what are my isolation possibilities? I might not have any. Okay, so that changes my search for me. That is a huge thing that I want to know. How high is this window? Am I in a crawl space or a basement? If I have a high window here, that means I have a high exhaust point. So if I go into this window, I get lift, everything's going out high, but fresh, cool air is coming in low. I could potentially have spaces in that room where victims are laying and they're pretty good. Like their oxygen concentration's not as bad, but from the outside, it looks terrible, right? So, like an offset window on a 2-story, hey, why is that window offset like that? I got one up top, one down below, and I got one kind of just in the middle somewhere. That's probably a location, a good idea that there's stairs right there. So you know what I mean? Like just those things like that can help aid you in like, where am I going? Why am I going there? And what are the possibilities on my face when I start my search efforts?
Right. I think, one of the things that, for people that will be watching or listening to this, that they could practice at home just on some of these things that you're suggesting. So like, obviously when we're at the fire, methodical is not always the initial stages of our response. However, how do we get there? How can we slow it down? So like it's with my son with baseball, like I tell him like, watch the ball leave the pitcher's hand. It slows it down, right? So when we're at the fire, we start getting all this stuff going on, and we want to get in and we want to do all this stuff. So how do you get there early? Well, train. There's no reason why you're not going into your first dues and walking around buildings and houses. Like I say to people, like, you've been in my class. Like I say to people, like in my class, like, get in with the real estate people. You got to open houses, walk around these houses. They're in your first due. And that's what you do, is you tell the guys on the crew, like, what do you see? Gauge them to try to point out some of these things that you were just discussing, so this way, the more you train on that, the more normal you make it in your mind to look for those things. When you're in rapid mode because there's a fire, your brain is processing it methodically, even though you're moving fast, right? So like the pitch can be coming, like I said before about baseball, pitch can be coming between 60, 90 mile an hour. But if you watch that pitch, you slow it down. So if we train on how we size up these buildings and how we start to look for telltales of like, hey, maybe this is where I should initiate my search, or maybe I should consider that, et cetera, right? We train on that. When we go to the actual emergency, our brain is already looking for them because we've trained our brain to think that. So even though we're moving fast, we're popping it out. We're like, yep, there's an air conditioner in that window. There's a high window here. This window's smaller and it's between these two windows. So I know that means that. So I really enjoyed that you elaborated on that. And I just, for a takeaway for the people, train on that, take some of those suggestions that Sean just made, walk around your first due and grab your crew, and even your youngest guy to even your most senior guy, and don't make it something where you're trying to. Fire service is great at breaking balls, but you want to make them buy into it. So don't bring them out. And if somebody doesn't point something out right, or they say something wrong, be like, oh, you're an idiot. Like, make it a good learning experience, right? And that's what my challenge to the viewer and the listener is, just to take away what you just said, is go out to your first due. And start looking for these signs and these things, and then have that dialogue, have that after action conversation of what that means. Like, why did you point out that to me? Oh, well, I figured maybe there could be, a smaller kid in there. Okay. What made you think that? Well, this, and here's why, and blah, blah. And, you start having that dialogue, people start pre-gaming stuff and opening up other people's eyes, so that everybody's brain is operating, so that when the call comes in, we can move fast, because we have this thing in our brain to make us have a frame of reference. Where I'm going with that is I enjoy a lot of what you said, and I'm just sharing with the audience is like, don't just listen to the podcast and be like, oh, cool. Go out and train on some of that. There is zero excuse on why you can't go around your first due and just pull 2-3 guys, whatever, and just talk about it. Be like, hey, tell me about this building. What do you think? If we had to do a search, where would you go first? What would make you think to go there, et cetera?
Yeah, I think it's an important conversation to have for sure. And like you said, knowing your first due. When I was in Florida, we go to these houses quite often. Everyone's got their frequent visitors, right? But I would go there, and I'd always notice when something was different, and I'd go check it out. And it would just be that this time I went and checked it out. I was being probably more nosy than I should have been. But I noticed that there's a shed out back, right? But they attached it to the house by like a covered walkway, right? It's all enclosed. And I'm like, man, that's really strange. Like, why would you do that? And realistically, they needed space. And what they did is they moved their daughter out there to that shed. She had her own bedroom and a bathroom in there and everything else. And, if you're not slowing it down, like, how easy is it to miss that? Right. And there's a lot of times where we have the opportunity to kind of like take in some information before this fire happens. And one of the things that I like to tell people is like, hey, man, predictable is preventable. If I know that somebody's doing like a renovation on their home or something like that, it's not exactly up to code, like I can kind of predict some things, right? When I'm going into a house on an EMS run or something like that, and I realize that like maybe this is hoarding conditions or maybe just things are different, right? Like, I note that mentally so that like if I have to come back here, and this sounds bad, but like I know in my head which houses have bariatric patients, because that could be a potential for, problem for victim rescue if I need it. I know, like, okay, this one's got hoarding conditions, like where are the stairs? If this fire's in the basement, how am I getting to it? Like, I just run that stuff through in all different types of situations, but specifically for search, like in my city, like fire escapes are a big deal, right? Like all the student housing and stuff like that, they got all these fire escapes and everything's chopped up into like single room occupancies. And, that for the search, that's a big deal for me to know, is like, oh man, okay, like I get lost in here pretty quick. From the outside, this might look like a 3-story, but on the inside, we got like 15 rooms. It's a little different. So, even like when you're driving down the street, everyone's got a main street in their district. Like, which buildings stand out to you? Kansas City had a fire, and they found people in a makeshift apartment next to the actual fire, building, and they were attached. So it's like those small things of like, hey, it looks like somebody might be actually occupying this space, even though it's supposed to be quote unquote vacant. And when you take all that stuff in and like you show up to the scene and you just dissect that as a true professional, right? You're just randomly like rapid fire. Like that is a special type of mental training, I think, that's just not going to happen overnight. Like you got to set the stage for that long before this thing happens, so that when you show up, you can be like, okay, boom, throw a ladder there, do this. Hey, get your search crew in here. Like you're just calling it out, and it's like second nature, right? And I don't think that's any different of like something to ask for as far as our expectations go than anything else we do. It's just how often are we putting time into it to making sure that we can operate at that level.
Right. I love that you just ended on that, because I was just about to jump in and say, and then you said it, it's that frequency piece, like, some of this isn't rocket science. And also, we're not asking, or suggesting very much of you to go out and do this. But just because you did it once doesn't suffice. And I'm not trying to be disrespectful, because I understand how staffing goes. If it's a volunteer thing, availability with people, we know, however, you got to have that frequency. You can't just go to one building, and it can't be the same building over and over. Maybe if you bring different crews or different faces to the same building, it's fine, but then change it up, pick a building a month if you have that luxury. A building a week if you have that luxury, right? But have that frequency level of doing this type of stuff, having those types of conversations, familiarizing with this kind of stuff. Yeah, it's extremely important. I definitely agree with that. So one of the things in the class, you talk about breaking free from the standard approach, that's super cool, right? So when it comes to search tactics. So can you elaborate on some outdated or ineffective search habits, which we kind of started with, that departments should reconsider, and what training officers, as a training officer show, or what training tactics should probably replace those in their training curriculum?
Yeah, I'll start by saying that by no means am I an expert, right? So I'm going to tell you what I think and what I've been able to prove through some things. But ultimately, what I want to encourage people to do is to look deep and ask their own questions of what this looks like in their organizations, or maybe how they're currently being trained, because it makes a difference. And like, I can't tell you how many times VES is a great example. All right. I don't want to say it's an outdated tactic, but the way that we're teaching it is not as efficient as it needs to be. And some of the ideologies behind it are very outdated and basically based off of fear, right? Like, I don't truly understand this, so I'm going to attach this like negative annotation to it that like people are going to die at this massive rate, and this is incredibly dangerous, and we should never do it except for under extreme circumstances. And then you start breaking down like what we know about rescues that are happening and what we know about isolation and stuff like that. And you start seeing like, man, there's only been 2 documented times really ever that somebody has died doing this tactic that's so dangerous, right? And I'm not saying that in a way to justify anything. I'm just saying, like, let's have these real conversations. So I say that to say, like, oh, it's a known victim, known location only, right? Or, one person's got to stay outside the window while the other person goes in, and it's one room only, and then we come out and then we repeat. Okay, so maybe there are times that we do have to keep one person out because we are truly only targeting that one space because conditions do not allow us to do anything else. Fine. But the missing part of that is, like, when we're teaching that, like, hey, it's more efficient to have the person, if you have a thermal imager, for example, to have the person with a thermal imager go in the window first, identify the door, go to it, assess conditions in the hall, do whatever it is you got to do, and then have that second person dump in right behind and start that search. Reason being is, if conditions allow, right, all we're doing at this point is continuing a search. It's no different than if we enter through the front door. We hit one room, we clear it, we go to the next, right? So there's that, like, oh, you can't do that because what if you get lost, or what if you get hurt, or what if you do any of the insert excuse here of why you can't do it, and then it doesn't get taught, instead of sitting there and going, hey, man, if our goal is efficiency and our goal is to target spaces as quickly as possible, and our goal is to reduce time it takes not only to locate, but to also remove victims, because we know that increases their survival percentages, why would I knowingly be at a spot? Let's say in that hallway, I have a bathroom and a bedroom, and I close this door and I never check them. I come out the window, I go into a next one, and I do the same thing. I've now missed that spot where victims are found twice, and I was right there at it because somebody taught us that we're not supposed to go past the threshold if conditions are favorable, right? So when we start dissecting that and we start breaking it down, we're like, hey, man, like, look, conditions are good. Like, we re-isolate the room upon, like, leaving. We left a space of refuge. So should conditions for whatever reasons change, we got a place to fall back to. We're going to be good. Like, it's fine. But we have to train our minds to realize, like, this is a communication thing. If I want people to start, like, operating that way, we've got to understand it. We've got to train this way. And, we'll slowly integrate this over time into our procedures. So that's one. Two, left hand, right hand, don't leave the wall. Like, God forbid you leave the wall. Like, that's a cardinal sin, right? Well, okay, so if I go right and I never leave the wall and I just keep my right hand on the wall, I got one of my searching hands on a wall and I got another one probably carrying a tool, which I'm, like, probably lazily sweeping. And then the person next to or behind me is likely doing the same thing. They're going to have their hand on my boot or something like that. They might be a little further off from me, but not by much. And we're searching the same 3 feet. We're taking searching hands out of play because we've dedicated them to things that we probably don't need them to be dedicated to at this moment. Now, I'm not saying we shouldn't search with a tool. That's a debate for another day. But what I'm getting at is, hey, if I step off this wall like 3 feet, just 3 feet, right? I know where the wall is. It's 3 feet to my right or 3 feet to my left. And I have the person that's with me go next to me. I've now increased my reach within that room. I don't need to marry myself to the wall, and I don't need to marry myself to them. Like, we're moving independently within the same space as we operate. We come to a bedroom. I go in the bedroom. I close the door. I search this 10 by 10 area. They do the same thing. We're separated by a wall, right? Oh, well, you can't do that, Sean, because now you're separated. What if something happens? Like, well, let's go back to the rules of engagement. Voice, visual, or touch. Okay. Knowing how buildings are constructed these days, especially, that wall is paper thin, man. I could probably still hear you. And if I need you, I can bang on it and you're going to hear me. Like, we've got to understand that some of these things that we've been taught in any aspect of our job, but specifically in search, may have come from a time where our equipment was not as good as it is now. Our communications were not as good, and our training was not as good. All three of those things make a difference in today's fire ground. So when you're pushing outdated tactics, like, I ask why. It's because you never challenge yourself, right? You never realize like, hey man, conditions are going to drive a lot of what we do. So naturally, if conditions are bad, I don't want you like too far from me. But if conditions are pretty decent, we got water on the fire and stuff like that, what the heck are we worried about? Right? Like, come on now. Like, let's start thinking with common sense. So, stop abusing the front door on everything. That's another outdated thing. Like, we'll put 15 people through there as a mode of entry for literally everything we do, but we won't look generally at other alternatives via like windows or something like that to start getting things done. Like, we don't always have to start and stop our operations at the same places as someone else, So I think there's a lot. I mean, we could talk about this all night, man. There's a lot to it, but just the basics, man. Be brilliant in the basics. And I know people say that all the time, but I don't know how else to put it other than like, hey, what you're learning in Fire Academy is like just to give you a very basic understanding of this operation. It's not efficient whatsoever, right? But we all have to start somewhere. And being certified is not the same as being qualified. So like if we're going to call ourselves professionals, then at some point we have to elevate this training, right? And say, hey, baby steps, I get it. Like maybe you've never been in gear before. We got to do these certain things, build the foundation, and then we'll get you to this point. But man, to think that people have been in the fire service for 15, 20, 25 years, and they're still searching on their hands and knees, and they're still holding onto a wall while another hand is like sweeping a tool next to them, and they're still holding onto each other, and like they're calling out literally everything they're touching. Like, that just blows my mind. Where do we blow the whistle and say, time out here, man? Like, tell me what I need to know, because right now, the most important thing we're doing is searching for occupants. And why do we say, hey, fire department, is anybody in here? Because we're listening for a call out. I'm going to miss a cry or something like that if you just keep talking to me about stuff that doesn't matter. Like, hey, I've got a bed. Hey, I've got a door. I've got a window. I've got this. Congratulations, you're in a bedroom. Like, I get it. And I'm not saying that we don't need to say some of those things, but like, man, that communication, like make it deliberate. Tell me what I need to know, because every time you tell me something I don't need to know, it slows us down. And then like eventually I get tired. I'm like, oh yeah, what's he saying now? Or what's she saying now? Like, I probably don't listen all that much. Right. So what have we done?
It's not just that, like, your personal ADD kicks in, right? So like, somebody you're trying to search and when we're searching, in a fire, you can't see shit. So you're using your training, but you're almost using your imagination to paint a picture, of this imaginary room as you feel shit. Right. So when someone starts naming out every single detail, it'll throw you off, and you start like you're passing something that it doesn't feel like a bed, but now bed's on your mind. So your brain is like, oh, did I pass a bed? It's like, no, you didn't pass a fucking bed, So like, I don't disagree with you at all. Like so the one thing I want to say, just so that nobody sends us hate mail, is just simply this. All right. There are many tactics, as the saying goes, there's 1,000 ways to skin a cat. Have I trained my guys on that? We've trained on stuff like that before, where you're calling stuff out, especially new firefighters, so they understand. However, the problem is muscle memory and single focus. We have to understand that there are multiple different approaches, and no call is the same. No room is the same. No house is the same. No building is the same. There are times and a place for you to do the same thing. Just like, when you're in church, you're not going to say the F word in the middle of mass, but when you're with your friends, you might say it. So just know when you need to do whatever and adjust accordingly. If it's a room or you're with a new guy, whatever it is that you think you might need to point something out just cause, or even if you're turned around, not to scare people. I always say to guys, like, one of the things I train guys on is like, I agree with you. Like, don't talk too much because it throws people off, right? And you can miss something. However, I say to guys, when you're scared, when you're turned around, when you're lost, if you have a conversation with your partner, it actually will lower your heart rate, which will then help with your respirations, and you will calm yourself down. So I always say to people, like, have that, don't sit here and read sonnets and shit, but like have a conversation just to calm yourself down and readjust and everything like that. So, one of the things I do is I sing. Like I'll literally, I'll start singing a song if I'm searching something that I kind of am like in my mind freaked out. I'm like, oh man, like I don't know how far in we are. Like I kind of wasn't thinking. And so I'll start to sing and kind of just get my bearings. So I'm with you though. Like the reality is simply this: don't overdo it. It's a tool that you were trained on. It doesn't mean every single search is done that way. It doesn't mean every single call is done that way. And nor should it be such a common practice that you do it all the time, because it removes the validity of when it's necessary. And it also screws people up because you could miss something by listening to somebody talking about nonsense. So no, I'm with you. I totally agree.
There's a point I'm going to make, but I'm going to make this one first. I don't want to say don't call out things, because I'll be honest with you. Like when I'm searching, if I'm searching an area and I'm finding more spaces like entry, like a door or something like that, like I'm probably going to tell somebody, hey, hold up a second. I got something over here. Like, maybe not that, because they might think I have a victim, but hold up a second. Let me check this out. Just so they know, like, hey, I have found something that is different than the basic box that I'm supposed to be searching. I need to investigate this, and I need to let you know that, because if I don't and you go further away from me, now that's where we get in some trouble here, right? So there definitely is a point to bring it in tighter and say, hey, hang on for a second. Maybe you just found a closet and you're like, oh, that's a closet, cool. But like, to be honest, if you can't see, you're going by feel, like check that thing out first. You know what I mean? Like there is a time and a place to do some things. I didn't hit this in my tangent, but I think it's worth bringing up now is blacked out training. There's a time and a place, right? And I think that's another one of those outdated things where like we'll get somebody who might have never searched a day in their life, and we're throwing a hood over their face or blacking them out in some degree and immediately bringing them to like the worst case scenario, and expecting them to succeed. What we do inadvertently is build training scars. I've been to fires where I can see okay. I've been to fires where I can't see at all. Right? They're all different based off of like the ventilation that's occurring and stuff like that. So I think when we're doing that, we need to understand when it's appropriate to start taking vision away, and when it's appropriate to build skills while they have vision, right? So that they can be successful. That's just a huge pet peeve of mine. And I don't know why we continue to do it in the fire service. And then usually the comment is like, oh, well, they're just learning. Yeah. Well, you never taught them any basic skills to build off of, though. Right? So how's that going to end? They're probably not going to be very successful. In fact, you're probably leaving them more frustrated than anything else, and you're building those training scars. So just, be intentional with the reasons why you're doing things, I guess is my point.
No, I totally agree with that. And that hinges on the instructor or the training officer, whoever's running the drill, whoever's, overseeing that, just tying it back to training. Like obviously we're talking about in the field, but how we get there is through training, and improper training or bad methodologies and techniques. They hurt that. So it's funny you mentioned this. Like, so I wrote a piece for Fire Engineering called "Are You Afraid of the Dark?" And it's about that experience I had my first time in the fire academy back in 2001, where we had to do searches, and it was with the hood over, and I went in panic mode. I was the youngest of four. My brothers were jerk offs, and they, bullied me and hazed me. And I had a problem with the dark. Just tough to have a fear of the dark when you're in our business, My instructor was really good. This guy, Craig Spurko, he works up in Irvington in Jersey, and he kept me calm and talked me through it. And he allowed me to visualize what we were searching. And then when I gained that comfort, then we darkened it out. And that was back in 2001 when that was you had to, there was a check in the box. Like I had to perform that task. What I learned from that as an instructor was one, don't sit here and start, especially if it's a new person, don't introduce them. Sometimes, like there's the attitude of like, both feet in. Yeah, but like you could turn good firemen away if you do that. We got to kind of slow them into like, hey, this is how it looks. So like, let's go through the techniques and the movements, and this way you feel it and understand it. And then if you have a smoke machine, I would suggest that, because that is closer to what we would really do than a blacked out hood. But either way, if you don't have that in your budget or whatever, and you got to make ends meet, then introduce that. And it's not always a thing that you fall back on, like you said. Mostly what we're trying to do is we're trying to just introduce people to different levels of how it's going to go for them. And the first introduction should be the form, how you search, how you adjust your body, what you should do, what you should feel or look for, or whatever, prior to just being like both feet in, we're throwing you in blacked out mess. Like they're not going to remember how they perform the search, because the whole time they're just like, I can't wait till this is over. I'm freaking out, So it's like, it's not good, it's truly not. So I'm glad you brought it up. It's unpopular for us to talk about that shit, but I don't care, because it needs to be said. There's, like I said before, there is a time and place for every technique that we train on and that we perform out in the field. But it doesn't mean it's the only way to always do it. You have to adjust. You have to have options and utilize those options, because not everything's going to be the same, and it's going to throw you off if you only do one type of way to do shit. I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, it goes back to really, for me, and then we can move on. But for me, it goes back to when you post a training video or a picture, generally people who aren't there are really the experts of what's happening, if you catch my drift, right? Hey, practice how you play, play no gear. And what they're failing to understand is like, we have to build confidence first. And if you've never done a skill before, it's not doing anybody any favors to say, cool, get full gear, get your air pack on, let's go. I'm going to teach you how to search in a tripod position. Okay. We add that later, right? That's all part of the training, right? Like
crawl, walk, run.
Yeah. So like maybe in your agency, right? Or whatever it looks like, you're going to do this. You're going to say, hey, we're going to have a discussion on search and tactics. Then we're going to revisit this, and we're going to pick a couple skills, right? And we're going to work at those. Maybe you just have your pants and gloves on, so that we can get through the motor skills of like how this should look. You try to take somebody, especially an older firefighter who's never been in a tripod position before, you try and make them search that way. If you don't work with them and you don't allow them to figure out how their body moves, you've lost them. Okay, that's 100% going to happen. Because guess what? We all don't move the same way. Some of us have better mobility than the others, whatever it is. So start with an even field, right? Just, hey, we're just nice and slow. We're just going to go glide. See how your body, now go this way. Now go that way. Okay, cool. Now everybody get their coats on, right? And you progressively add the weight and everything so that at each step they can be proficient. And then you do the scenarios. Now that could be however long that looks for you, I don't ever go into a hands-on search class we do with an expectation that we might get to the end scenario before I feel that everybody is at least capable of doing the things that we have planned, because that's how training should be, right? Like you should be learning and all that other stuff. So that's one mentality in the training realm of things I wish we would get over, is being so quick to judge that just because we didn't do something with an air pack on, or just because like we did it with pants on only, that somehow it's not as important because it wasn't full scale. And it's like, man, we're not trying to get anybody hurt here, right? We're trying to increase this together and build confidence, not just in my ability to do the skill, but as a team, right? And there's a certain way you have to do those things. So I feel like that's worth bringing up as well, especially since, what's the title of the show? The training officer, right? Like anybody that's in charge of training should understand this concept.
No, I agree. You know, and just to sum it up, not to sound sexy, just to sum it up on everything you just said, confidence builds competence. We cannot expect them to be competent in the tasks if they're not confident in how they're going to go execute the task. So you get there by slowly introducing them, building that confidence so that they become competent. And I think that that's a missed thing for years in how we're training firefighters. And that's why we get two ends of the spectrum. You either get the most salty guy ever who is, you know, for what it's worth, you know, everybody wants to be Bull in Backdraft because he was the cool character. Bull dies at the end because he was a fucking unsafe jackass, right? You know, or you get the guy that's too safe and he's a yardbird and he's afraid to go in and he's just got T-shirts and stickers and tells everybody on social media that he's a firefighter. So, you know, we have to find a way to bring these people in so that they're safety conscious, but they're also willing to put forth the risk or accept the risk to control the chaos. And how you get there is striving and building on that confidence so that they can go and perform the task. You know, when we just thrust them in full bore, you either scare people that they never want to do it again, or you make them think like everything's supposed to be full bore. And it's like, no, like not always, you know, so I'm with you. I don't want to go down a rabbit hole on it either, but no, I'm with you. Like I love this stuff that you're saying. Cause this is like, I mean, this is, you know, this is the shit that I think, you know, I just love it, you know?
Well, it's what we should all think, really, to be honest, you know,
right. Yeah.
If we're really in the positions we're in, which is training other people, I would hope that that's your mindset, because we have too much ego-driven people out there that are just trying to force things because it's like, well, I'm in this position now, and now you have to listen to me. And it's
right,
man, that doesn't mean that you're doing any good, though. You know what I'm saying? So anyway, rant over.
No, I love it. All right. So intelligent aggression, right? So concept of intelligent aggression is a major theme in your program. It's kind of what we were just talking about before, you know, finding that balance, right? How can training officers instill this mindset in their crews so that firefighters balance speed and efficiency with strategic, data-driven search decisions?
Well, first, I'm going to throw out one of my favorite quotes to start that is, you can't lead anybody further than you've been yourself. So if this is the expectation of your crew, it's like, you better be on it, right? Like you better have an idea of what that looks like, right? Meaning, you can't expect them to be aggressive and make all these intelligent decisions if you're not providing them with the information, right? And that's kind of half the battle there is like right now we've got a divide in the fire service. And you kind of alluded to it just before you asked this question is like, we've got like the overly risk averse people who are like afraid to make any decisions. And then you got the overly aggressive people that are just like, well, I'm a big bad fireman and we're going to go into everything and search everything every time because we can and nothing else matters. Both of those are equally as dangerous. Right. We've got to bring that to the center and truly like have a level of true understanding of what it is our objective is. And I think part of that is supplying the information, right? Like, hey, are you reading FSRI's studies that they're putting out on fire dynamics and victim survivability and things like that, right? Because that's important if you want people to make appropriate decisions. Are you supplying them with information for firefighter rescue survey? You know, like, hey, do you know what this means? Because if you're asking somebody like, hey, you better get your ass in that window and do this, then you better also have a reason and say, it's because I know that like, I don't know, it's like 19% of all of our rescues are done this way. You know, with over an 80% survival rate or whatever that looks like, right? Like, I don't want to throw out the numbers because I don't have them in front of me, but point I'm getting at is when you can state your case and then say, this is why, this is where we're winning, this is where we're not, then you can build a training plan that makes sense, right? Like everybody knows the backbone of everything we do is based off of training. If you have bad training, you're probably going to make bad decisions, right? I mean, that's just common sense. So I would say when we're doing all that, building that program, making sure that everybody comprehends it, right? But don't just bore them with stuff like, oh, read this, read that, read that. Like, training should be fun. So when we're building out our scenarios of what we want to see, right, they should be realistic. Are we throwing those curveballs in there? Like, what happens if you're not making those decisions, right? Like, if you're taking too slow, is like, do you have an actor that's coming and tugging on these firefighters and screaming in their face and saying, my son's inside, get him in there? Like, you know what I mean? Like, really escalating that stress, because the reality is, like, the fire ground is a stressful situation. I don't care how many fires you go to or how comfortable you are. There is a physiological stress response that is occurring in our body. So because of that, we have to implement that into our training so that we can learn to work through it. And what happens more often than not is we have these conversations. Yeah, I'm aggressive. Oh, heck yeah, I'm going to go through that. Dude, yeah. And we think we're prepared and we're ready. And then we freeze because mentally we're overwhelmed. It's not that you're not capable of doing it. It's just that you haven't prepared yourself to do it. Right. And that's really the biggest thing. You talk to anybody who's had a rescue. I talk to them all the time in my class. The first question I ask, was it easy? And they all say no. And I follow it by, were you prepared? The amount of people that say no is very alarming. Some people say yes because they understand the importance of what we're talking about here. But the vast majority of people are like, no, I was not prepared for that. So, like, I guess my point here is, if you want to build this into your programs, like, you want to start having your firefighters like think this way and act that way and everything else like that, like, you have to have a clear understanding of why we're doing these things, right? An example of that would be, and this isn't, to pat ourselves as a cadre on the back or anything, but when we do search classes, whether it be in like a burn building or an acquired structure, we walk through there before the students come in, and we take all the firefighter rescue survey data and we put it on the walls. So if we're in a bedroom stats, right? Like, if we made a bed, we're putting how many victims are found on beds and what their survival percentage is. Like, how many victims are found in bedrooms and on floors or within 6 feet of a window or a door. Like, we take all of that and we're just walking around each space and we're tagging it up, whether it be spray paint or chalk, however. And the reason we do that is it's visual, right? Like, we're doing these skills and drills all day. We're having these conversations, but there's visual learning that's happening now. And what's actually able to do is, you've seen them, now you're doing the skills and you're attaching those two together. Like, because I'm doing this, my survival percentage is doing this. And it just becomes one. And at the end of the training, what really happens is the mindset shifts of like, hey, I remember, 6 foot from a window, we're finding victims. So subconsciously, when they're doing their VES training or part of that, they're being cautious of where they're jabbing that hook or sweeping that hook. And they're making an effort to get out there and actually sweep within that 6 foot before just like diving in or half-assed doing things. And we didn't teach them that. That's just instinctive of the conversation and the visual cue that they've had for hours before getting to that point. And then it just becomes like part of how they do things. So again, I'm not an expert. People could hear what I'm saying now and be like, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard, Sean. And that's cool. Like, you don't have to agree. But I do think, like, you can't just expect a result. You have to be able to provide the ability to achieve that result, and if you don't have that, especially as the person who's putting on the training, you're not doing anyone any favors.
No, not at all. You're 100% right. You're doing a disservice, and therefore you shouldn't be the person instructing. I don't disagree with you at all. I like that suggestion. I actually I don't use that, and I'm very passionate about training. So it's something that now in my new position I'll have to pass on to my training chief, but I want them to do it
Sure.
because I thought I just like you're telling me that, I'm like, that is a visual aid that, just in our thing, that is a good retention thing for them, with like having those stats right there, like, I'm like, wow, like that's so smart. I'm going to use it. I thought it was a pretty cool idea. Like, I'm like, we're going to do that. Like you met Scott. So like, I'm going to talk to Scott, he's my training chief now. I'm going to be like, hey, this is what we're doing now. I thought that's a really cool idea. And it's a simple idea that, the investment is so simple and the return is just huge. I don't know. I thought that's a really cool idea. I like that.
If you, there's training, and there's so many opportunities in training. You want another simple little thing that helps. You want to see how good people, because here's the thing, like when you critique somebody, right? No, I didn't do that. And they can't physically see it. So it's just like their word against yours at this point, unless you show them video or something, right? So what I've found, especially in this, if you're trying to create like that aggressive search, right? Like, I know I'm confident. I know for sure I hit all these spaces. Like I got this. Start everybody out. Put like flour on the floor or something like that, right? Like we used to use baby powder. I guess now that's not such a good thing to do, like whatever, but flour works great. Anyway, you put it out on the floor and you tell them, give me a search. And they see every place they hit. I mean, you cannot deny it. And then you say, cool. So at the end of the day, we're going to do this again after we've done all this training, and we're going to see where you're at. So here's your starting point. Okay. And you're going to see just how much you improved by the end of the day. And when you compare those two and they can physically see it, man, like just the amount of confidence that you could just see in their face is amazing, because they realize, they're like, oh crap, like maybe there is something to, if I put my body in this position, I'm able to hit these spaces a lot easier, like, I don't know. There's not really any science to it, but it's something that we do that I think is really cool, and it resonates well with the students, that I try and pass on to people when they're doing search training, because it makes a difference.
That's another cool nugget that we're probably going to use also. That's a really cool thing to do. I like that. So last question, and then I'm going to give you the floor to talk about anything else you want to talk about. So the disclaimer lead up to it is, I don't want anybody to perceive this as like a level of narcissism or arrogance. Talking about training and the theme of training, there's objectives to our lesson plans and a desired outcome to what it is that we're training folks on, right? It's the same as us doing this stuff, whether we teach, whatever it is that we do. There should be some kind of a goal, objective, outcome. So I am asking you with the most humility, what would you like your legacy to be, or what would you hope that you were able to have achieved for a said legacy when it's all said and done?
Wow. What I would say, what I would hope my legacy would be is to get more people to understand that it's okay to love the job. It's okay to be invested in this, man. It's a big part of what we do. I mean, you're spending a third of your life doing this. And I would hope that part of that, of getting people to understand, like, hey, this job's a lot of fun, and it's even more fun when you're good at it, right? Is to understand that the reason why most people are passionate about training is because they care about you. It may not look like people who are passionate about training, they get a bad rap, right? Like, oh, you're just, that guy's arrogant or whatever, thinks he knows everything, like that kind of stuff. But in fact, it's really the opposite. Some of the smartest people I've ever met who have taught me things are the most humble people that I've ever met. But we all share that common reason. And that reason is like, hey man, I want you to go home to your family just as much as I want to go home to mine. And if you don't see the importance in this, then at least somebody here is going to, right? And hopefully that catches on throughout time, because part of caring about your brothers and sisters is making sure that you're able to, one, perform the job. So there's physical fitness that is involved in that. There's also, skill acquisitions and things like that. But I don't know what other way to show someone that you actually care to be so invested into one thing that can actually kill somebody. Like if we mess up here, it can be a big deal, right? So I would hope that would be my legacy. I hope that people would see the fact of like how passionate I am about training, and the reason why I like to share this stuff with everybody, and I want to fire them up to be passionate about it too, because, let's be honest, man, like everybody's on a different path, and, experience continues to leave this fire service. And with that experience, if things aren't being passed on, then we're in a bad spot. We really are. We're leaving people to just kind of like, oh, well, you'll figure it out. You'll be okay. That's not always the truth, man. So I would hope that a good training culture, of, hey, we like to train here. We care about people. We care about our citizens. We care about this job. I would like that mindset to be what I leave behind.
I love that. I love the training culture piece too. I talk about that all the time. You can improve the culture of your entire organization just through training. And I've seen it happen at 3 different departments now that I've been part of, where we were able to improve the culture through training. It's that important. It's not from the chief or driven down from some policy or some sexy video or quote, but it's actually through training. Like I've seen it, it's very impressive to watch it unfold. So I love that you said that, because I've been on the receiving end of witnessing that actually work. So I love that you said that. Give you the floor for final words. One of the things I would be remiss just because. So we got FDIC coming up in a couple months, and then you have your own thing coming up at the end of June, and I'll be there, which I'm really excited about. Tell us about what you got going on, anything else that you wanted to leave or say, and then tell us when you're teaching out at FDIC, and then how people can find you and stuff.
So I'm really busy. That's probably a downfall of mine. It's just I just take on so much stuff because I have a terrible habit of not saying no. So I couldn't even tell you where I'm going to be next. I know it's like, without looking at my calendar, gosh, my wife's got to tell me half the time, like, hey, you got to be somewhere. I'm like, oh man, thanks. I can tell you at FDIC, April 8th, I'm doing a workshop, the Searchable versus Survivable workshop at like 8 in the morning as of now, unless the time changes. So come out, hang out. If you don't want to hang out with me, go hang out with Dave. Be a good time. But we're doing that, and then I believe I'm doing some hands-on while I'm there as well. So come and hang out with the Insight Fire Training guys and learn some stuff about thermal imaging. That'll be a fun day. Other than that, June, man, I can't wait for June. I'm looking forward to it. I know you're going to be coming up and doing your speech, which is awesome because there's going to be a lot of training captains and chiefs and stuff like that in attendance. So that's super exciting for me to have you be able to come and be a part of that. Other than that, man, I just, if you need something, you call me, reach up on social media, get a hold of me. I'm pretty easy to get a hold of. And if you email me and I don't get back with you, you need to email me again because I probably forgot. So that's really it, man. Just trying to carve out as much time as I can for that little baby that we had back in April. So she'll be about 1 year old come FDIC. So that'll be cool.
Yeah, no, congratulations. And now I'm looking forward to, man, I'm excited. I appreciate that. And I'm excited to seeing you in April. Definitely go to Sean's class if you're able to make it. The workshops, we do them early in the week, and I'll tell you, like they're gold. So this is your second, right?
Second workshop, fourth time doing this class.
Yeah. So listen, I've sat in and taken your class for years in different areas, obviously, different locations outside of just FDIC. Take his class. It's a great class. I'm telling you, brother, listen, like we're friends. We could literally not see each other for an entire year and then just be cool and hang out and shoot the shit. You're probably the most humble person out here doing this, and never lose that. Because you know why I said that. Never lose that, right? I admire you. I appreciate it. I look up to you. I think you're doing great stuff. And I'm glad that we were finally able to get you on a show, because you didn't show up when I was supposed to be on your show.
I know.
You ghosted me and Nick, man.
No.
So at least I got you on here,
Yeah, listen, I told you I'm terrible about like scheduling. So Nick texts me, so you gonna be on the show? I'm like, I'm in tech rescue training. I got machine rescue class I'm doing. I can't make it. And then I felt like a total a-hole. I was like, oh, great. So,
right.
I'm sorry.
No, you're good. It was funny because you text me while me and Nick were recording, because he must have texted you to ask you if you're going. You're like, I'm so sorry, man, I didn't make it. And I'm just like, I'm sitting there like rolling my eyes while me and Nick are recording the show.
Hey, but you know what? I'll tell you, if you text me that you want coffee, I will always get up early in the morning and have coffee with you.
And I can attest for that. Yep. Yes, you will. I appreciate that.
So I'll make it up to you. I'll buy you coffee next time.
Yeah, thank you, man. I appreciate it. All right. Well, listen. Thank you for doing this and being the cool dude that you are. I hope that the audience and the listener viewer was able to take some great nuggets. Get out there and train. Do it purposely. Do it purposeful. Build confidence with these people. Get out and look at your buildings and talk about it. A lot of great information that we got from you, Sean. So I appreciate that. That's it. Thank you, everybody. Stay safe. This is Dave McGlynn with Fire Engineering Podcast Training Officer. Take care.